Hey, Vance, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Now, for those who sit at home like we did on Monday and watch American Ninja Warrior and say, "Well, I could do that. It's
Mm-mm.
not that hard."
Mm-mm. I've never said
Oh,
that.
Yeah,
it's just hang on to a couple of obstacles and slide around. It just avoid the water. It's not that hard. How hard is it?
it is much harder than it looks. These guys on the show have been training this professionally. I've been doing it for 9 years now, so it's become a professional sport. Not just guys that have 9 to 5 jobs that are going to train after work. It's athletes that have been doing this their entire lives, and the obstacles look easier because we have gotten so much better over the years. But I don't think a normal person could do more than maybe 3 obstacles on the show now.
Now, I know you built a course in your own backyard. Is it still there? And are you
Yes.
still adding things to it? Because they do change things or evolve them to on the show for the competition because they know people are growing and making their own stuff.
Yeah, well, I have a bunch of obstacles at my parents' house up in Atlanta. I live down in Tampa right now, but every time I'm over there, I build even more obstacles. All my tools are still there because I live in a tiny apartment now. So anytime I'm in town, I'm always building stuff. I built wing nuts, an obstacle where you go side to side, and that's over my pool right now. And I have a bunch of stuff in the basement. I have a bunch of stuff in the backyard. So I'm building as much stuff as I possibly can to train.
How much time do you have to dedicate to training to compete in this and win this?
Yeah, well, I've made this my entire life. It's not like I'm going to school anymore. I don't have a job besides Ninja. I've made this my entire life. So I'm probably working out maybe 4 or 5 hours a day. And then I'm also studying other people's runs, studying other competitions, and also traveling basically every other weekend to a different competition around the country. So I'm doing a lot more than just the training itself, but probably with training 4 or 5 hours a day.
Now, you said you live in an apartment now. So do you find yourself like parkouring off your own walls because you're just thinking about the obstacles all the time?
I think if the rent was so high, I probably would. I'm not willing to pay the security deposit if something goes
Yeah,
wrong,
that'd be
but
bad.
yeah.
No, if you're 6 foot, 210 pounds, you're probably too big to do this, aren't you?
Yeah, so a lot of guys that are around 6 feet, there's a couple that do really well. I know Jody Avila, he's gotten to stage two a couple times and he's insanely strong. But the people that are that tall also have to carry that weight with them. So they have the reach advantage,
Mm.
but they also it's a game of endurance and it's a game of how long can you hold yourself up. So those guys usually don't do nearly as well. I think the 5'8" to 5'9" range is probably the sweet spot. So I'm a little bit under that, but also the guys that are a little bit over that can still do well. But yeah, it's all strength to weight ratio. So the more you weigh, the harder it is to hold yourself up. And you saw that with Kai on stage four this year. He's
Yeah.
180 pounds and he got to around 60 feet in the time limit. And then the last 20
Yeah.
were so much harder just
Yeah.
because he had to pull that weight the entire way
Yeah,
up.
even using his legs, you could see it was such a tug just to keep moving. Now you compete with and train with and against your friends too. So how bittersweet is that for you and them? Because you want them to do well, but obviously you still want to win because this is, like you said, your life and your focus.
Yeah, well, it is really sad because both of the last 2 seasons I went up on stage four against some people that I've trained with. I know in season 15 I went against Daniel Gill on stage four, and we both ended up making it in time, and I beat him out for the $1 million. And we trained together in Houston for season 14 because right after season 13 my gym shut down here in Atlanta, so I moved in with my grandparents there, and I trained with Daniel for that season. And it was amazing. He went before me, so being able to watch him accomplish that was amazing. And luckily, this season, I went against Caleb Bergstrom, who I moved down to Florida to train with. He owns the gym that I train at down in Tampa. So I trained with him for a year and a half for these last 2 seasons, and seeing him also accomplish that was amazing. Luckily, this time around, I did it first, so I wasn't stealing the title away from somebody else. But yeah, I'm very lucky that the two people that I did beat were people that I was so close to, so there's no bad blood between any of us. So it's definitely really cool to be able to do that with people you've trained with.
And speaking of him, he's like aspirational and inspirational. He is such like a cool person to show that there are no
Yeah.
social norms in this because he's very spiritual. He's very much a family man, but he's
Mhm.
also very competitive. And watching you guys cheer for each other, and even the shock on both your faces, waiting for that final time announcement,
Yeah.
you could see it was exciting and like stomach churning at the same time. And he's got his, has he had his youngest is, or no, his baby's due soon, right? A couple of months.
He was actually born a couple months ago,
Okay,
so
so this was
this aired a
right because
little
it would
bit
have been
after it filmed.
pre-recorded.
So
Yes.
he's been here for a little bit.
So,
Gotcha.
so how soon after the show airs does the money show up in your bank account?
That is the question. It all depends on what you do. We signed a bunch of contracts saying we
Right.
have to do a bunch of stuff. So the second I'm finished with all that, I should get it, but we'll see.
Now, does
Now,
I have no
everybody
clue.
who's there have to sign kind of a gag order, so to speak, so to not let the cat out of the bag who wins? Because you had some family
Yes.
support, and obviously so did the other competitors too.
yeah.
So people know the end result long before we, the public, do.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a bunch of NDAs, and if you break them, there is a hefty check that you have to write. So we are not willing to take that risk.
Good call.
Now
Yeah,
you're only 19. You've got, I mean, really a few more years of prime physical condition. How much
hopefully.
longer do you want to do this before you say, you know what, that's behind me now. I want to move on. I want to get a whatever job and get a family and all that. At what point are you going to say that I've had enough being the American Ninja Warrior?
That is the question. I know there's been 4 winners in the show's history, and I'm 2 of them. The other 2 were both in their 30s when they won. So I could hopefully go on for another 20 years if I'm capable of it. But yeah, it all depends on if the show stays around that
Mm,
long, which I'm very much hoping it does, because even if I'm too old to compete, even if I'm too injured to compete, I still want to be part of the show in other ways, whether that's behind the scenes with a camera, whether that's
right.
holding up the interview signs, whether that's building the obstacles or commentating or hosting. I want to be a part of this as long as I can be. So I would definitely love to compete, but also this sport is becoming professional athletes, and that's why you're seeing so many of the teens do really well, because they don't have the responsibilities of a job and having to provide
Yeah.
for a family. So I'm also pretty lucky in that I won early on, so now I have the money to where I don't have to work. So I could train hopefully as long as I possibly can.
Now, would
So
you like to see something like this turn into like an Olympic style sport? Because, like you said, it's becoming
Mm.
internationally more popular and in just followed. And it is such a regimen that you have to commit to. Do you think it's something that they could add to that? Or would you love to see that in the future?
yeah, there's been a lot of speculation that they could possibly be in the 2028 games. I would love to see it. There could be a bunch of different possibilities, whether it's the 4 stages like in Vegas, that could be an insane Olympic sport, or they could have the races like they've had in the semifinals in stage 2 this last few years. But they could also have specific obstacles, like the highest warped wall that you could possibly get could easily be its own sport. They could have the Super Salmon ladder
Mm.
and have a certain amount of rungs, and the fastest time on that wins gold. There could be so many different possibilities. It's going to be very interesting to see if they actually do that. But if they bring the Super Salmon ladder, I'm definitely going for the gold.
Absolutely.
If you're younger and want to start and compete down the road, first, what age do you think is ideal to start training? And then second, what do you start doing first? What part of your body do you work on and what do you do?
That's a good question. So I started when I was 10 years old, but a bunch of people are starting way earlier than that now. I know there's a little kid in Tampa. He was 7 when he started training, and he has like 2 million followers down there, and he is just insanely good. So it'll be very interesting to see when he's old enough to be on the show. Can he keep that? Because when you start training a little bit later, your body is more developed and you don't change too much.
Mm.
Like I've grown maybe 2, 3 inches since I was 13. So I have like a mostly similar body to back then. So it'll be very interesting to see if those super young guys can hold that up long enough to still be that good when they're on the show. So I think starting when I was 10 was very good for me, because by the time I was 13, I had started getting the hang of it. And then that's kind of when I was already fully grown. That's when I was a little bit more developed, and I'd already started getting my base at that point, and I could just really grow from there.
What's more important, upper body or lower body to this?
It's mostly an upper body sport, but even the upper body obstacles are your full body. When you're even doing something like the pegboard where it's fully locked off, you're holding your arms at 90 degrees, but your knees and your hips are doing all the motions to be able to propel you to the next thing. So it's a lot more core too. Like people think upper body and lower body obstacles, but every single obstacle on the show is pretty much every part of your body. So it's a full body workout no matter what you're doing.
Now, here's the question. If you got ever approached to do something like Dancing with the Stars, because it's all about balance, core strength,
Yeah.
and whatnot, is
Yeah.
that something you or other competitors you would say could totally do that? We've seen some professional athletes do very well on that show over the years because they're so balanced in their physique and their training.
Yeah, I know Daniel would do amazing at that show. I think he used to be a dancer, so he would do pretty well. Me, my hips are not very flexible, So I don't know how good I would do, but they also have those professional trainers. So if I'm on it, that would definitely be interesting to watch. That's all I'll say.
When the competition's complete, you've got some time off. Do you let yourself go for a couple of days, or do you just start working right away?
Oh yeah, there's leading into Vegas probably around 3 months where the diet and training is as strict as it can possibly be.
Mhm.
And the second you get home from Vegas, I always go to the store. I get donuts, I get cake, I get mac and cheese. I just throw every single thing that I can possibly fit into the grocery cart, take that home, and within the next like 2, 3 days, eat every single thing.
Now, after this year's, was one of the things you grabbed pizza? Because that was one killer of an obstacle for people to get through. It was the undoing of many of your competitors. That looked like no joke to like assess and get through that pizza obstacle.
Yeah, I think that obstacle scared me so much that it turned me off to pizza for a little bit. So that's actually one of the things that I avoided.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Vance, and we can't wait to see if
The
you're gonna
three-peat.
three-peat.
We're looking for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
We're cheering you on, my friend.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank
Thank
you. Be
you.
blessed. Be safe out there.
Thanks, Vance.
Thank you, you too.